Hey everyone, welcome to another Practical Pet Business. I hope things have been going well for all of you out there, especially as we transition into this different season. A lot of new questions coming your way, your staff's way, and brings up the topic that we're going to discuss. Lorin, you and I get asked for a lot of different resources, suggestions, referrals, all the rest of that. And it generated a conversation between you and I that we said we have to do with our practical pet business folks. And that is having a resource list, because you are an extension of that care team for all of your customers. I know you did this. I tapped into you many times for, hey, who do you prefer? Who do you like? I get asked that all the time. I have a list of go-tos that I go to and will share for different things. Yours must have been much deeper and wider and longer, because I'm sure you got asked that daily from folks.
It's a great thing that when your customers trust you so much that you're the first person they call when they need anything animal related. So, we offered grooming and we offered daycare and we offered boarding and so we covered a lot of the bases. Um, but there are things that people don't think about creating a database for until you get asked. And I mean, there's two ways you can do it. Some businesses like to just include everybody in that category in their locality. I wasn't a fan of that because if you're trusting me to come to me and ask me who I recommend, I don't want to be Google. I mean, you can do that on your own. I wanted to provide a list of places and people that I knew of firsthand. So, for example, things like, which emergency room. There were four emergency rooms in my area. We had one that we thought was better than the other ones. And that's the one that was on our list. When people asked us, we didn't put it in writing, but we answered the question of why we thought they were better. And we gave examples. Um, and everybody has their own experiences. So that was always our caveat. This is based on our experience and those of some of the feedback of our clients. Um, but it got down to the nuances of an orthopedic vet, a cardiologist vet, a acupuncturist, who was the best chiropractor, veterinary chiropractor, that we could recommend. Not always in our area. I mean, if the best one was an hour away, that's the one we recommended. Um, but the one that always seemed to get either asked the least, and so we made it part of our database that we handed out, part of our resource list, so that people went, oh, it would trigger the idea in their head was an attorney. You need an attorney that can write something into your will or into your, what your final wishes are to take care of your animals. What's the plan? Where are they going to go? Do you have something set aside? Do you have a pet trust?
Yeah.
Um, there's a number of things now that you can choose from to adequately care, from as simple as, your brother and sister-in-law are going to take them, to I'm leaving this amount of money. I'm in a few different people's wills, and one in particular, I was in their will for their last dog, and unfortunately, everybody has an expiration date, and they got another dog, and they said, "Would you be willing to do that for this dog as well?" And I was like, "Of course I would." But, their thing was, we'll leave you the house, which is paid for, and we'll leave you this X amount of money so that you can adequately care for this dog should anything arise. And I'm like, well, I'm committed. I'm going to take care of the animal anyway. But
Yeah.
that's the extent that they went to. And everybody's going to be different. An attorney can help people figure that out. What do you want to do? What parameters do you need? There's a famous, what is it, Leona Hemsley in New York,
Yeah.
who
Yep.
left millions for her dogs to be cared for in this in the style to which they were accustomed. Wish I had that to leave my dogs, but but you can go everywhere with that. It's really nice if you can proactively acquire that and tweak and adapt and adjust that list and make it a genuine list. Make it and by that I mean if you have a relationship with that business, that's great. It shouldn't be the reason that they're on the list. I mean, everybody is struggling in business as it is. And, would you want somebody to come to you and say, I need 10% of every groom I send you, if I send them to your grooming salon? No, you appreciate it. And, you want to support the businesses that support you. But at the same time, I used to have some people send customers to me that I was like, oh, thank you. Not sending anybody over there. I appreciate that you sent these people to me, but I'm so not good with some of your practices. I'm not telling them that. I said, thank you very kindly. I appreciated it. And I continued on with my resource list of these are who I would take my animals to.
Yeah.
So very structured list. And if you put that together and you start thinking about the nuances, I work with a lot of vets who can refer to stores in their area that provide the best resources for freeze-dried, raw, cooked, you know, things like that, because they know those stores and know that they know about nutrition. So it works in reverse too. So put something together like that.
Yeah. I love that you just really hit the key, and that is it should be a holistic choice, not a financially driven
Right.
recommendation. Does this serve the pet in the best manner? Does this serve the pet parent? Does this align with your philosophy? Because at the end of the day, what we're talking about here is really reinforcing your relationship with the pet parent that's coming into your business. If you're referring out just based on money, that's going to come through. And you say, well, they're not going to know about the referral fee or this or that. No, but they're going to see, I'm kind of surprised
Right.
this is who they referred me to when, so and so is also locally here. Um, Everything reflects on you. Whatever you're saying, whatever you're doing, we have talked about it from graphics and postings and social media and all down the line. This is that next level where they're coming to you with the utmost trust and saying, I believe you have a trusted resource that I would really appreciate you sharing with me. That that builds that relationship. When we talk about how do you avoid driving towards a price point, relationship, this is part of how you do that. Building that resource list where who's the best trainer for this? And I love that you broke it into those sub segments. So important. And one that I'll add that a lot of folks are surprised, and I would get this quite often. And it's probably just because of what I've done, in my professional world as well as my personal world. But they'll ask about eye care and dental care for their pets. And what's really interesting is if you put in a little bit of that research to make sure you've got that deep list that you're referencing there, Lorin. I love you're going to build your knowledge as well because you start
Right.
to hear from these folks and these experts. Here's my philosophy. Here's why I have this philosophy. Here's how I treat it. This is why I treat it that way. And they'll take the time. Because I've said this to folks and they're like, oh, nobody's got the time to do all that, Rob. They absolutely will. They prefer that. I want clients that are aligned with the way I think, I operate, and I want to deliver the best outcomes. So they'll take the time. And you being a resource for them, I always say you need the external and internal evangelists. internal evangelists or folks within your store, within your company that know, understand, believe the mission, fight for the mission. The external evangelists are those customers and or folks who took the time to learn about you and your philosophy, your approach, and really will tell others in those moments. I don't have a store, but I get asked all the time, who's the best here? And like I think the other thing that you brought up too, which was so great, um, because I do travel around the country so much, and I do have folks around the country that have done, business with me, bought my books, all the rest of that stuff, heard me on the radio. Um, they'll ask, "Hey, I know this might seem like a wild, shot, but do you know somebody in upstate New York, or do you know somebody in?" And it's funny because for as long as I've had this list, I will continue because I'll reach out to people if I don't have someone in that area
Right.
where someone's reached out to me. And that is another element of this that really raises your credibility with your customers because we don't have a lot of ticks here in, Southern California. So Lyme disease is not as big of a concern necessarily.
As
And
it is here.
yeah, as it is in other parts of the country. And so it's really interesting because I've known several folks who have Lyme disease who are concerned about those issues and all that. So I've learned a lot. I know who the folks are to, tap into in those spaces in the pet world and outside the pet world. That being said, as a business, we really want to make sure we show the value. This, believe it or not, serves so many purposes. Not only does it reinforce that you're an expert resource for them, that you care deeply about those customers and the beings that they're coming into your store for, but it's also a great way to really elevate your knowledge. And what ends up happening is you build up this relationship within those folks that you would refer to, where you're getting to hear from them. Wow, we're seeing an influx of these types of issues, those types of issues. You and I, Lorin, we have talked about this with so many business owners, especially the independent shops. How do I know what to bring in? How do I know
Mhm.
if I should jump on this tech versus that tech? Here is another great pivot for you to be able to tap into what's going on locally. What is going on within the pet world that I should be aware of and making sure I have available to my customers.
Well, and since you brought that up, not necessarily even locally, I expanded the list as the list continued to grow to include veterinarians like homeopathic veterinarians, and other specialists in other parts of the country that do a telemed version for animals.
Love it.
So, that became another resource. The thing that I I really want to point out though is this isn't not recommending a bulletin board type effect.
No,
You
no.
know, if you walk into some businesses and they got 50 pieces of stuff on their counters and in places that you can pull one of, and it's like, oh my God, do you know any of these people? They just come and drop their stuff off and then come and
Right.
replenish it. That's not a recommendation. That doesn't give you any added value. That's just a place for a bunch of paper. You want to provide a list that you don't even put up. It's a list that you can provide your customers when they come and talk to you and they tell you about what happened with Fluffy. And you're like, oh, what emergency room did you go to? Or, oh, who's your vet for that? Well, my vet is so and so, and I really like them, but I don't think they really know a lot about this. Well, I have somebody that, oh, you do? And then you go, yep, let me tell you about them. And then eventually you work around to you have somebody for everything, always check with
Right.
me first, kind of
Yeah.
thing. And then you become who they rely on for information on it's just a value that has no cost that you will get returns on that are endless.
Yeah, two things that you brought up that I want to jump on. One, um, asking the customers too. That is such a great,
Oh, feedback. Yeah,
yeah, like, wow, I'm sorry you went through that. Who did you go to and what was your experience? Such a simple question, and people love to share. And you build a deeper bond with the back and forth sharing.
right.
It's not a, well, I would have gone to, tell me somebody else, because people retire, people shut down their businesses.
Sure.
So it is great to hear that. And I think that's such a great, source of information and call out that I think we miss too often in the business world. We're so eager to share our expertise, or who, we have a predetermined, leaning towards. And if you hear this story, at a minimum, you have a chance to grow your resource list, you know, and you've got verifiable outcome experience. Love that. Secondarily, I love that you talked about it's not just locally. Um, when Belle was diagnosed with a vestibular issue, there was nobody locally, and I know everybody. And this wasn't even a US. Now I'm certain there were vets in the US that could have helped me and would have been great pivots. The irony of it was a vet in another country that
Right.
really gave me the pathway, the confidence, and so and by the way, that was because as I'm bouncing around to folks like we're talking about, and this, they're like, I really don't know, but maybe so and so does. Let me connect you with them. Let me connect you with them. And then someone said, wow, I got to be honest, Rob, the best person for something like that is outside the country. Are you okay with? I'm like, absolutely. I'm a South American herbs guy. Where do I need to go? Literally, it is the reason Bella is still here today. And I am grateful for all of those people. So when we talk about that relationship strengthening, they didn't have the answer, but they had other people to pivot to get me to the answer. And so
Mhm.
that's another part of this as well. You don't have to have every answer. This is not about being the end all be all encyclopedia of, who to turn to, who to go to. What it is though is about really being a resource. And I like what you just said. I know a lot of folks. I always tell people I'm not an expert, and it blows out. Oh, you certainly are. No, actually, I'm a connector. I'm a connector. That's what I am. And the reason I'm a connector is I don't have the years to put into things to really make me an expert in many of the things that people will throw that label around. And I know you'll agree with me much too easily, but
Yes.
I can connect you with those folks. So if I'm an expert at anything, I'm an expert at connecting. And that's what we're talking about here today, really, is being another chain in that information link that your customers need. They value deeply, because when they're asking you those things, they really need someone to help champion what's going on. And you can
Well,
be
and this
for them.
this list is about quality, not quantity too.
Yes.
So you don't need to put this list together with 20 names on it in a bunch of categories and things like that. You probably know a couple people already that you think really well of, or that your clients have come back and raved about, and you can add them to the list. You can start somewhere. But once you start paying attention and start asking questions and start getting feedback from your clients, start meeting these particular veterinarians, the number of veterinarians that would come into my store because they had heard about it. And then they would ask questions and they come around. And it wasn't until they had been in the store at least for a while, or their second or third time, that I even find out they were a vet. It's like, oh, how'd you find your way here? Well, I have customers who come here. Oh my gosh, that's great. And then I find out who those customers are, and then I talk to the customers. What do you love about this vet? Why do you see that vet? And you gather information so that you can see who they are and whether or not you're comfortable recommending that. Not that you have to, but it's information gathering, collection, and redistribution. preferably based on experience and knowledge. So start somewhere. Start putting something together, and remember that you're going to update that list as time goes on. Businesses sell, people retire, things change. There have been many, many times that I don't like a particular facility, but I like someone in it. And so I embolden that on the list and say, this person is the only one I recommend. So if somebody else is seen, that's on them. If they like the place enough and they choose not to see Mary, but they choose to see Sally, that's their choice. I recommended Mary, or Dr. So-and-so, but start somewhere and help people out where you become, my gosh, invaluable on this.
Love it. Let's get on those lists. We know you've got a lot to do. We appreciate you taking time with us today. Feel free to add us to your recommended podcast list, though, right? I think Lauren and I agree on
of course.
that.
Top of the list.
Send us, though, your suggestions. What do you have on your list? What do you get the most requests for? We'd love to be able to share that out with everybody. What categories, what things are hitting you on a regular basis? Send that to practicalpetchat@gmail.com. Visit us on all the different social media sites. Let us know. Be a part of the solution for other folks. Be a part of that network. Thank you for joining us here on Practical Pet Business.
Bye, guys.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk. Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat, all rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.